Every now and then, a court case comes along that reads less like a dry legal document and more like a high-stakes thriller. It's got massive wealth, intense conflict, and a really compelling mystery right at its heart. In this story, that mystery revolves around a very specific pile of cash, and a question that sounds simple, but is anything but. Whose money is it really? And here is our number, $2.9 million. That's the amount a judge ordered to be paid from family assets to cover a husband's absolutely massive legal fees. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, in reality, it was anything but. Because here's the unbelievable twist. The husband's entire portion of the family's cash, his whole share, was already frozen, completely locked down by a different court in a totally separate case. And that creates the central burning question we're going to unravel in this explainer. Who is actually footing this bill?
Okay, so to really get what's going on here, you've got to understand the couple at the center of it all, Mrs. and Mr. Medlow. Their story isn't just about a marriage falling apart. It's about the chaotic unraveling of a financial empire that they built over decades.
So picture this. They get together back in 1990. He's already a pretty wealthy guy. She, on the other hand, is starting with basically nothing. But by the time they separate almost 20 years later, they've amassed an absolute fortune together. Their family asset pool was valued at an incredible $73 million. It was an empire that was about to become a battlefield.
Now, right in the middle of their separation, they get this huge influx of cash, $31 million, all from the sale of just one property. You'd think that would make things easier, right? Just split it down the middle, nice and clean. But oh no. This is exactly where things start to get really messy.
See, the husband wasn't just dealing with a divorce. He was fighting a war on 3 other fronts at the exact same time. He was facing criminal charges. He was stuck in a massive commercial lawsuit. And he was tangled up in another fight over land. And these other battles, they were about to come crashing right into the middle of their family drama. And crash in they did. One of those cases led to this, a freezing order. A court just stepped in and boom, locked down $15.5 million of the husband's assets. And where did that money come from? It was his exact half of that $31 million property sale. All of a sudden, his entire share of the cash was just gone, completely off the table. So with his money frozen solid, the husband goes to the family court and asks for that $2.9 million for his legal fees. What happened next in that courtroom was this incredible clash of 2 totally different realities, presented by a wife fighting for her own financial survival and a husband fighting to save his entire empire. And really, this whole conflict boils down to 2 completely opposing worldviews. For the wife, this was a clear violation of her legal rights and a risk she simply couldn't afford to take. For the husband, though, it was all about pragmatism, about looking at the bigger picture. The wife's argument was just crystal clear. She basically said, look, the money was split. My $15.5 million is legally mine. His $15.5 million is frozen. So it's simple math. This $2.9 million can only come from one place, my share. You're asking me to pay for his legal messes, to risk my own future to clean up his past. But the husband, he was looking at this from a totally different altitude. His argument was all about scale. He said, come on, we have over $70 million in assets. $2.9 million is just a drop in the bucket. Just think of it as an advance, a strategic investment that I need to win these other cases, which in turn protects the entire $73 million pie for both of us. And you know what? At first, a judge actually bought the husband's argument and sided with him, but the wife appealed. And when the appeal court took a look, they found the first judge's decision wasn't just a little bit wrong. It was built on a series of fundamental, fatal flaws. The appeal court didn't just say, we disagree. Oh no. They took that first decision and surgically dismantled it, piece by piece. They followed 4 logical steps that completely unravel the whole thing and finally answered our mystery. First, and this is the big one, they called out the most basic error, identifying the money. The first judge said the husband was using his own funds, but the appeal court just asked, how could he? His funds were frozen. It was a logical impossibility. By simple process of elimination, the only liquid cash left legally belonged to the wife. That was the whole ballgame. Next up, a huge legal no-no. There's this fundamental rule in property law called the Stanford Principle. It basically says you have to figure out who legally owns what right now before you can even think about moving it around. The first judge, he just skipped that step entirely. He jumped right to giving away money without first saying, hey, this money already belongs to the wife. The third flaw was a terrible miscalculation of risk. See, the wife was also making what's called an add-back claim. Think of it like this. She was telling the court, hey, he's already wasted or hidden millions of dollars. You need to pretend that money is still sitting on his side of the pile before you split what's left. If she was right about that, the $2.9 million might be the only cash she'd ever see. Giving it to the husband now meant it could be gone forever.
And the final nail in the coffin, the husband's own behavior. He'd already ignored a court order before, and he didn't even tell his wife about the freezing order for months. The appeal court said this pattern, this lack of honesty, should have been a massive red flag, but the first judge, he'd barely even considered it.
So with these 4 fatal flaws laid bare, the appeal court's decision was a slam dunk. But what happened next? Well, that's where this story takes a truly shocking turn, and it holds some huge lessons for all of us. So the wife won, the appeal was allowed, the original order was tossed out, but here's the devastating catch. By the time the appeal court made its decision, the husband had already received and spent every single dollar. She had won the legal battle, but the money was gone forever. This unbelievable story leaves us with 5 really powerful takeaways. First, once a share of property is defined as yours, it's yours. It's not some general family pot. Second, watch out for that big pool argument. Every single dollar matters. Third, your partner's legal problems outside the marriage can absolutely become your financial nightmare. Fourth, a history of bad faith and breaking rules will catch up to you in court. And finally, and this is the most painful lesson of all, if you get an order you think is wrong, you have to file to stop it immediately. Because by the time you win your appeal, the money might already be long gone. In the end, Miss Medlow was proven right. The law agreed with her. But she was still out $2.9 million. And it just leaves you with this really tough, lingering question. When the legal papers all say you've won, but your bank account says you've lost, what does winning even mean?